Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're your shortcut to understanding complex stuff, basically. We take all sorts of material articles, research, even your own notes, and distill it down.
Right, into those key insights you need, packed with facts, maybe a bit of humor, hopefully enough to keep you hooked.
And today, we're really jumping into the deep end. It's fascinating, honestly, maybe a little mind-bending. We're exploring ancient prophecies, these allegorical figures, secret societies.
And how they might have influenced history and maybe even future events. That's the idea anyway, based on the sources.
Exactly. It's not just about old texts. It's about trying to trace this narrative that, well, the sources suggest spans millennia. Hints at these long-term agenda-shaping things.
Yeah, our, let's call it mission for this deep dive is to connect these dots, things that seem totally separate, historical events, religious narratives, and see if they form this complex tapestry, power, prophecy, hidden agendas. It's all in the source material we've been looking at.
And just so you know, the listener, our goal here isn't to say this is the absolute truth.
Not at all. It's about impartially looking at the information presented in these, frankly, very detailed sources, trying to understand the narrative they lay out.
It's about grasping what they suggest about how things have unfolded and maybe where things are heading.
Precisely.
And wow, the sources. It's quite a mix. We've got ancient biblical books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, Daniel, Ezekiel, Revelation, Isaiah, the foundational stuff with these big prophetic visions.
But it doesn't stop there.
No. We're also looking at historical accounts, plus texts, digging into secret societies, esoteric traditions, the whole shadowy side of things.
Putting it all together, trying to make it make sense, that was definitely a challenge.
But super intriguing, so get ready. We think there's some insights here that might just make you look at history and maybe the future a bit differently. Okay, so let's start at the beginning, because the sources really anchor this whole prophetic exploration in what they call Jesus' own end-time template.
Right. It's not just random warnings. It's presented as a framework found in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 17, and 21. Those key passages.
They lay out a kind of roadmap.
Exactly. And within that roadmap, there's this incredibly clear prophetic marker, a chronological one. Jesus points to the abomination of desolation in the temple.
And he explicitly says Daniel talked about this first, Matthew 24.15.
That reference back to Daniel is huge because Daniel gives the timing.
Okay.
He places it right at the midpoint of the last week of 7 years, from the 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel 9.
So it's not just a general sign, it's like a specific moment in a countdown.
Precisely. A timestamp, almost. Something you can anchor other prophecies to.
That makes sense. And what's the immediate instruction tied to that specific moment?
It's urgent. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Matthew 24.16.
Then, at that exact time.
Right, and the sources point out Jesus uses this Greek word tote, meaning then, at that time, when, over and over in this discourse.
So it emphasizes the sequence, like dominoes falling.
Exactly. Step 1, then step 2. It's presented as a very specific unfolding timeline, not just a collection of potential events. Hashtag 1.2 unveiling Revelation's fog.
Okay, so if this abomination is the key marker, how does that help with, well, the rest of it? Especially Revelation, which can feel foggy.
That's a great way to put it. Revelation is often foggy, dense with allegory. But what the sources argue is, when you take passages from Revelation chapters 2, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12 are mentioned, and you sort of arrange them around Jesus's chronological marker and the signs he gave, that fog starts to lift.
Really?
Yeah, it's like this marker acts as a key or maybe a Rosetta Stone.
Right.
Suddenly, other prophecies, even from the Old Testament, start clicking into place within this template.
So it brings coherence to texts that might seem chaotic otherwise.
That's the idea presented. It suggests there's an underlying order, a master key, to understanding huge chunks of prophetic writing.
Interesting. So it implies a hidden structure, connecting ancient warnings to future events in, like, an unbroken chain.
Right. Not about predicting exact dates, maybe, but about understanding a grand narrative, a long-term plan that these texts are laying out, a framework for making sense of it all.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit from the timeline itself to the characters, the figures that populate this prophetic map. We're talking beast empires, allegorical figures. Sounds pretty intense.
It is, and the sources start with maybe an unexpected one, Pharaoh. Specifically, Pharaoh Necho, historical guy, defeated by Babylon at Carchemish, prophesied in Ezekiel 29 and 32.
But there's more to it than just history, right?
Oh, definitely. This is where that concept of dual prophecy comes in again. A lot of the details in Ezekiel about Necho, they don't quite match what actually happened in his reign.
Like with the king of Babylon and the Assyrian figure we talked about earlier.
Exactly the same pattern. An ancient event foreshadowing something bigger, something future. And what's really telling is how Ezekiel 32.2 describes Pharaoh allegorically as a whale in the seas.
A whale. Seems a bit random.
Well, that's where the language gets crucial. The Hebrew word translated whale is tannin. Okay. And pannin actually means dragon, serpent, sea monster, even dinosaur or whale. It comes from tan, meaning an elongated monster preternaturally formed, a sea serpent or dragon.
Whoa, okay, so definitely not just flipper, more like a dragon.
Precisely. The sources argue this strongly suggests a sea serpent or dragon creature, something correlating with, biblical sea monsters like Leviathan.
Or even supernatural beings. Fallen angel, Satan?
That's the connection made. Ezekiel 29 calls Pharaoh the great dragon tandem of the rivers. Prophetically, this links him, this earthly king, to the Antichrist, to Satan, and even to those 4 beast empires that rise from the sea in Daniel 7.
So powerful rulers, full of pride, become symbols, almost vessels, for this recurring dark force.
That's the interpretation presented. It's not just ancient history, it's a template for understanding figures yet to come. Hashtag 2.2, the multi-headed end-time empire.
Okay, so Pharaoh as a dragon foreshadows something bigger. Where does this dragon imagery lead ultimately in the prophecies?
It leads straight into Revelation 13. This is where the sources say the prophetic allegory comes together. We see this 5th empire rising from the 4th, described as a 10-horned beast coming out of the sea.
Another beast from the sea.
Yes, and it's explicitly latched back to that dragon concept. It's described as a hydra dragon of the nation sea. Think of the multi-headed Leviathan.
Right.
This beast has 7 heads with blasphemous names or crowns. And these heads aren't random. They're said to represent historical empires. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome.
And 7th.
The coming revived Roman Empire. And crucially, this beast, this great red dragon, is already present before that midpoint marker we discussed, before Israel flees, according to Revelation 12.
Okay, 7 heads representing empires.
Okay.
But the really chilling part in Revelation 13, verses 1 and 2, it says these heads could heal or grow back.
Yeah, that detail is incredibly significant. It suggests more than just one empire following another. It implies this incredible resilience, maybe even a regenerative power.
Like it can't be truly defeated by normal means, it just keeps coming back.
That's the unsettling implication. A cyclical, enduring power that seems almost supernatural in its ability to persist no matter how many times it's seemingly struck down. Hashtag 2.3 occult connections to the dragon.
So this dragon's symbolism, does it show up elsewhere, outside the Bible?
It does, quite significantly in occult traditions. The sources connect it to medieval alchemy, specifically Rosicrucianism. The dragon was apparently an emblem on their drug pots.
Drug pots, okay. Why a dragon?
It seems deeply symbolic. The sources link it back to Azazel, remember him? Identified as a leader of those ancient antediluvian seraphim watchers.
Right, the fallen angels.
He's said to be memorialized in these traditions as the Chem of Mendes of alchemy and Rosicrucianism, also the goat of Mendes and the angel of Capricorn.
Chem, like alchemy.
Exactly. Chem is Egyptian for black, the source word for alchemy. It points to a really deep ancient lineage for these practices.
So a direct line from biblical narratives about fallen angels to medieval secret societies, and these strong ones in Ezekiel 32, Azazel and others. They're distinct from human kings.
Explicitly distinct. They're called former angels, the chief ones of the earth, imprisoned down there with dead human kings, according to Isaiah 14. It paints this picture of a supernatural hierarchy operating behind the scenes.
So who is Pharaoh talking to in that Ezekiel 32 prophecy then, if it's a dual prophecy?
Good question. The term chief ones there, the Hebrew is atud. It means hairy he-goats, but figuratively also leaders of people.
He-goats. Okay, that conjures up images. Satyrs, devil gods.
Exactly. Satyrs, devil gods, maybe Duke Seer of the Dragon, one of the terror ones mentioned in the sources. Understanding this connection clarifies who Pharaoh is addressing.
So Pharaoh's downfall is like a preview.
An ancient illustration and foreshadowing, as the sources put it, of the bigger end-time destruction of Babylon and the Antichrist figure. It suggests this continuity of dark, supernatural influence on earthly rulers. Hashtag 2.4, the pomp and fall of nations.
You mentioned destruction. Let's talk about pomp. That word keeps coming up, applied to Egypt and Babylon and Isaiah and Ezekiel. Translated as excellency, arrogancy. What does it really signify here?
It's more than just pride. It's presented as this spiritual sickness, this self-exaltation that, according to the prophecies, always leads to a fall, catastrophically.
Overreach, arrogance.
Yeah, all of that. Overreach, excessive splendor, arrogance, pride. It's directly connected to Satan, or Halo, as some sources identify him, whose fall is prophesied for this very reason.
Yeah, other figures too.
Right, these antichrist figures, the Assyrian king, the king of Babylon, also called Hillel, Tyrus, they all fall the same way, described in Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28.
Like Tyrus. Ezekiel paints a picture of its immense pride, right?
Right.
Perfect beauty, amazing navy built with the best material.
Exactly. Cedars from Lebanon, oaks of Bashan, peak arrogance and material splendor. And it leads directly to downfall.
And the prophecy is blunt about the end result for nations like Babylon. Isaiah 47, Zechariah 2, Babylon falls from being the lady of kingdoms.
It drives home the point. This pomp, this hubris, it contains the seeds of its own destruction. It's a warning embedded in these ancient texts.
Okay, let's dive deeper into these allegorical figures. The sources bring up Eliakim and Shebna from Isaiah 22. Historically, they were officials in King Hezekiah's court, right?
Right.
A household master and a scribe.
Correct. But the interpretation presented sees them as much more than that. They function as prophetic allegories for much greater spiritual entities.
How so? Let's start with Eliakim.
Eliakim, his name means God raises up or sets up. He becomes this profound allegory for Jesus himself.
Really?
His story in Isaiah 22.20-25 is seen to foreshadow Jesus' crucifixion, burial, resurrection, and his eventual return to reign. It's a deliberate parallel.
Wow.
And even his father, Hilkiah, my portion is Jah, is seen as foreshadowing God the Father in his future role with Melchizedek high priest. And then verse 22 makes it explicit. The keys to the house of David are given.
Which Revelation 3.7 says are given to Jesus. Okay, that's a strong connection.
Very strong connection.
Yeah.
Supreme, enduring authority.
So if Eliakim represents Jesus, Shebna must be the contract.
Exactly. The sources identify Shebna as a direct prophetic allegory for Satan.
How does that play out? He builds himself this fancy tomb, right? Hewn high up in the rock.
Yeah, a sepulcher hewed for himself from a rock on high, like building his own fortress. But ultimately, he's carried away in a mighty captivity by Assyria.
And this mirrors Satan's fate.
That's the connection drawn. Shebna's fate points directly to the end-time capture of Satan, his imprisonment in the abyss, and his destruction at the end of the millennium, as laid out in Revelation 20.
And his tomb, the sepulcher.
The Hebrew word quibber can mean graves, but also temple or dwelling place, a stone stronghold. Allegorically, it suggests Satan built himself this great temple or fortress, maybe the house of judgment, the Archeon, the very place he'll be cast down from into the abyss.
His fall from station and state being pulled down.
It directly mirrors Satan Haliel's fall to the pit in Isaiah 14 and Tyrus's fall in Ezekiel 28. It's that consistent parallel again, linking these historical or allegorical figures to Satan's ultimate destiny. Hashtag 3.2, the Assyrian cedar and the trees of Eden.
Okay, another intriguing figure. The Assyrian was a cedar in Lebanon from Ezekiel 31, and then it gets weirder. This Assyrian is called the greatest tree in Eden.
Yeah, that definitely makes you pause. Assyria, the kingdom, wasn't in Eden before the flood, so what gives?
Right.
It's presented as another dual prophecy. Remember, Pharaoh Necho was compared to the Assyrian, while this Assyrian figure, in turn, connects to the end-time Antichrist.
Okay.
But the sources clarify. The actual Assyrian tree in the actual Eden garden was Satan himself. He was the greatest of the trees, meaning the greatest of the angels present in Eden. Ezekiel 28 and 31 support this view.
The one corrupted by pride and beauty.
Exactly, who tried to raise his throne up to heaven like the world tree of polytheism, a direct challenge.
And the description, fair branches, in Ezekiel 31. What's the significance there?
Fair. The Hebrew Yafa means beautiful, bright, handsome, but it's often used specifically for fair white or fair skin.
Okay, and the connection.
The sources link this allegorically to the Rephaim, Horam, Indo-Aryan branches, sometimes called the shining ones of the Albigens.
Shining ones, like fairy tales.
Sort of. It connects to myths of fairy queens and princes of the elven bloodline of giants. It suggests this deep occult genealogy tied to these figures, almost a hidden race influencing things.
Wow. And the part about fowls of heaven made their nests in his boughs.
That's interpreted as representing winged Nephilim and or cherubim who rebelled with Satan. It's an image of a corrupted hierarchy sheltering under him.
So under Satan's shadow, his protection.
All the great nations, the beast empires, dwelled in the Nephilim world order. That's the picture painted a global power structure influenced by these fallen entities and their offspring.
And the end-time prophecy about this.
Isaiah 25.5 says, "The branch of the terrible ones shall be brought low," which is interpreted as referring directly to these powerful bloodlines that reign on the earth for Satan and his council of gods. It's a really detailed and frankly disturbing look at what the sources call the lineage of evil.
All right, let's talk about these terrible ones. The name itself is pretty evocative. The sources start with Asher. Not just the ancient king, but the root, the lineage, for that Rephaim hybrid Assyrian in Isaiah 14, the one symbolizing the end-time Antichrist.
Right. It immediately brings up questions about lineage, identity, the nature of these powerful figures.
So who was Asher historically and prophetically?
Well, Asher and his company, the Hebrew word is kohal, meaning an evil assembly or multitudes, are listed among the slain kings of nations cut off by the sword in Ezekiel 32. Historically, Asher was a son of Shem. The name became synonymous with the Assyrian people. They left Shinar, Nimrod's territory, and founded cities like Nineveh, described as seed cities for the second beast empire.
So laying the groundwork for future power structures.
That's the implication. But then it gets stranger, more specific.
How so?
The sources make this chilling claim that the daughters of Asher produced hybrid humans via intermarriage with Mesopotamian Rephaim.
Hybrid humans? Like who?
Figures like Arioch, Gilgamesh, Sargon. It suggests a deliberate blending of human and something else to create powerful lineages.
Sargon the Great? He had a preternatural mythos, right?
Yeah.
Almost supernatural origins.
Exactly. And significantly, he established a huge empire, but also maintained representatives of all the old ruling families Nephilim at his court.
So he actively preserved these maybe non-human or hybrid bloodlines in power.
That's what's suggested, a hidden continuity, a conscious effort to keep these ancient, powerful, maybe corrupted lineages influential throughout history. Not just random chance, but deliberate preservation. Hashtag 4.2 Gog, Magog, and the End Time Alliance.
Okay, that connects to the next set of terrible ones mentioned in Ezekiel 32, Meshach and Tubal. Slain kings of terror, linked to what the sources call the end-time counterfeit Armageddon War.
Right. And Gog, who's presented as a prophetic Antichrist figure, is specifically called the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal in Ezekiel 38. These aren't just dusty old names. They're identified as key players in a future global conflict.
And the names themselves, Meshach and Tubal. Do they connect to anything modern?
The etymology is fascinating. Meshach, or Mosi, in ancient texts is linked to Muscovs, which is where Russian Russo supposedly derived. Moscow itself is said to be named after Meshach.
Wow, and Magog.
Magog means land of Gog. It apparently comes from Sanskrit and Persian words for great and mountain. So land of a great mountain or land of the great Gog.
And these groups, historically,
Linked to ancient Scythians, Tartar tribes, powerful nomadic peoples. They show up in the Table of Nations alongside Gomer, Galatians, Javan, Greeks, Madai, Medes, Tyrus, Thracians, a whole network across Eurasia.
and there's an occult connection too.
Yeah, the sources mention an occult history linking these Japhetian bloodlines, the descendants of Japheth, Noah's son, to giants like the Scythes. Again, that theme of hidden, ancient, powerful lineages tied to future conflicts.
And their fate. It's similar to Pharaoh's.
Strikingly similar. Just like Pharaoh was symbolically defeated by Babylon with hooks set into his jaw, Gog is prophesied to be dragged out for slaughter with hooks set into his jaw in that end-time war described in Ezekiel 38 and 39.
Dragged out. Literally.
It's a visceral image, and Gog's mighty ones will be devoured, just like Pharaoh Necho's army was. It's presented as a direct foreshadowing of the Antichrist's ultimate destruction on the mountains of Israel. A clear prophetic parallel. Hashtag tag 4.3 mighty men and royal bloodlines.
Let's dig into these mighty men, the Gibborim. The term is used for the Nephilim, the ancient hybrids, right?
Right, but it's also used more broadly for powerful warriors, tyrants, and significantly for dynastic kings descending from Rephaim giants.
Like specific examples.
Kings of Gibeon, Persia, the Medes. It suggests this thread of powerful, maybe giant-descended lineages continuing through various kingdoms.
And does this idea carry into the New Testament?
It does. You have the Greek word megistanes and the Latin grandees, both meaning great men or lords. Mark uses megistanes for Herod's lords, setting them apart from his regular captains.
Indicating a special status.
Exactly. And Revelation 18.23 says the merchants of Babylon were the great men of the earth dominating trade through sorceries. It implies this direct continuity from the mighty men and men of renown of Genesis 6.
Right through to the end-time, oligarchical bloodline nobility.
That's the connection made. Revelation 6.15 also groups the end-time kings of the earth with the great men and the rich men and the chief captains, reinforcing what the sources call this Gibborim relationship, a persistent, powerful, perhaps supernaturally influenced elite.
Which brings us to Daniel's statue. The iron mixed with clay, Daniel 2, that's the interpretation there. Kings mingling with the seed of men.
Right. The word for man there is Adam, meaning red or ruddy human, maybe implying a lower degree or stock of humanity linked to red soil or clay.
So the mingling, what does it suggest?
The prophecy implies, according to this interpretation, that at least 5 kings, or 1/4 of that final kingdom, will not be human. Due to this mingling, maybe physical hybridization, maybe something like demonic possession with this seed of men, their posterity, their offspring.
That's profoundly disturbing. An alteration of humanity itself at the highest levels of power.
It is, and the sources emphasize that the statue's appearance was terrible. The Aramaic word is chal.
Linking back to the terrible one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Underscoring the idea that these powerful, often supernaturally touched bloodlines persist. These branches continuing through history, waiting for their final role in the end-time drama. It's presented as a living connection, not just ancient history.
Okay, let's shift to one of the most vivid, almost nightmarish prophecies in Revelation, the first woe, Revelation 9. It starts with a star falling from heaven, given the key of the bottomless pit.
Yeah, that imagery alone. Unlocking a forbidden realm. It sounds like the start of something truly awful.
And what happens when that pit is opened?
Immediate chaos. Smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace. So thick it darkens the sun and the air.
Suffocating.
Exactly. And out of that smoke come locusts upon the earth. But these are definitely not your garden variety locusts.
Talk.
They're immediately given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. This isn't presented as a natural disaster. It's supernatural, a deliberate unleashing of something ancient and malevolent. Hashtag tag tag 5.2, the scorpion monster's nature and torment.
And these scorpion creatures. They're different from later plague.
Very distinct. They come before that massive 200 million man locust war mentioned later. They are specifically the first of 3 dreadful woes. Their role is unique.
An opening act of torment. What kind of power do they have?
The Greek word is exousia. It means authority, specifically authority over mankind and government, like a potentate. It can also refer to strength or even a rank within the degraded angelic order of powers.
So not just physical power, but authority. Angelic authority.
They're presented as an angelic locust army, a rebellious army host led by Abaddon, or Apollyon the Destroyer Angel. It's a specific supernatural force with a commander.
And their mission isn't to eat crops.
No, strangely, they're commanded not to hurt the vegetation of Earth. That's key detail setting them apart from normal locusts or the later locust army.
So what do?
Their function is pure torment. They sting like scorpions and torment those who do not have God's seal on their foreheads for 5 months.
5 months of agony. So bad that people want to die but can't. Revelation 9 mentions that.
Exactly. Men seek death and shall not find it, a torment beyond normal endurance.
And their appearance. It's bizarre. Human faces, women's hair, lion's teeth, scorpion tails, crowns of gold.
Yeah, Revelation 9.7-10 paints this grotesque picture. The golden crowns reflect their ancient authority. The overall description leads the sources to suggest they are degraded watcher angels or some form of angelic destroyers.
Wow. Creatures from a nightmare, specifically designed to inflict pain, not destroy the planet. A blend of human, animal, angelic. Deeply unsettling. Hashtag 5.3 mythological parallels to scorpion creatures.
It really is. And interestingly, this description isn't entirely unique to the Bible. Do these scorpion creatures show up in other ancient myths?
That's what the sources explore. And yes, there are strong parallels. Even the word scorpion, Scorpios, traces back to Scopos, meaning watch, sentry, scout.
Like the watcher angels.
Exactly. Then you look at Sumerian myth, Scorpio the zodiac comes from Akrabu, scorpion man. Babylonian, Assyrian, Akkadian myths have the Aquamalu or Gertablulu, literally scorpion untamed man.
Scorpion men.
Yeah. And Tiamat, the serpentine goddess. She supposedly created scorpion gods for battle with weapons no other god could withstand.
So these aren't just pests, they're mythological warriors, guardians.
Very specific descriptions, too. Half scorpions with large scorpion tails, large elongated human heads covered by conical caps, Gilgamesh-like beards, wings, horse-like bodies, lion legs, bird feet, and their role in myth. Guarding the sunrise and sunset, the gate of Hades. They're called beings of terrifying splendor. Even the hero Gilgamesh was supposedly terrified of them.
Terrifying splendor, and they guard the underworld entrance connected to Mount Mashu, which is linked to Mount Hermon's Gate of Hades.
That's the connection made, reinforcing this idea they're tied to ancient, forbidden places and knowledge, not just random monsters.
And it's not just Mesopotamia.
No, parallels pop up in Egypt, Isis, Ankit, Anuab linked with scorpions, and even the Aztecs had the Tzitzimime, or Tzitzimitl.
What were they like?
Skeletal heads, human faces, long black hair, talons, scorpion tails, and snakehead tails too. And descriptions mention screaming mouths akin to an epilepsy fit.
Which echoes that Revelation 9.6 line, men seek death and shall not find it.
Exactly. The consistency across cultures, Sumerian, Babylonian, Egyptian, Aztec, and Bible is pretty striking. It suggests a shared ancient recognition of these terrifying entities. Hashtag 5.4, the woe sequence, and Abaddon Apollyon.
Okay, so Revelation 9.1 says, one woe is past. How does the sequence continue? What comes next?
The sources explain the three woes happen after the fourth trumpet sounds, announced by the three angels, which are yet to sound, in Revelation 8. And the whole mystery of God is supposed to be finished when the seventh angel sounds in Revelation 10.
So there's a clear progression. When does the second woe hit?
It's linked to the end of the ministry of the two witnesses, that 3.5-year period where they prophesy against Babylon and the 10-king world government.
Okay. And the third woe?
The sources suggest it might be connected to Abaddon Apollyon being released further, or perhaps more broadly, to the actual destruction of Babylon itself.
Oh, so?
That phrase, alas, alas, that great city, is used 3 times in Revelation 18 about Babylon's fall. And the Greek word behind alas is oue, which also means woe.
A double meaning. Woe as in sorrow, and woe as in the specific prophetic judgment.
Exactly, pointing to this profound, world-shaking destruction.
Now, Abaddon Apollyon, who is this figure exactly? The leader of the scorpion creatures.
Yes. Described as a destroying angel, the fallen prince angel of the pit prison in Revelation 9.11. Importantly, the sources stress he's distinct from Satan.
How so?
Satan gets imprisoned after Armageddon. Abaddon Apollyon is identified as a Nephilim from the antediluvian epoch, a powerful being from before the flood. The Book of Enoch apparently classifies him as one of the Satans, the destroyers of the antediluvian world.
An ancient destroyer unleashed for the end times. How does he relate to the Antichrist figure, the son of perdition?
Well, the word perdition, apolia in Greek, means destruction, eternal misery. It's used for the Antichrist in 2 Thessalonians 2.
Okay.
What's fascinating, according to the sources, is the etymological link. Apolia connects directly to Apollyon, and even more specifically to Apollonia, which links to Apollo, the sun god.
Apollo, like the idea of gods taking avatars. Vishnu, Shiva, commandeering humans.
That's exactly the parallel drawn. It suggests the Antichrist might not just be a charismatic human leader, but an avatara, maybe possessed or empowered by this ancient entity, Apollyon.
Appearing with power and signs and lying wonders, as 2 Thessalonians says.
Right, making him seem almost divine, incredibly deceptive, and perhaps irresistible to a world looking for a savior.
Okay, so this Antichrist figure, empowered perhaps by Apollyon, what's his big claim to power?
It's audacious. Thessalonians 2 describes the son of perdition exalting himself above everything called God, even sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he's God.
Declaring himself God in God's temple.
Exactly. And the sources say this implies his pedigree, his claim, will allege descent from the line of David. A direct but false claim to be the Messiah.
And this claim is backed by deception, right? Matthew 24 warns about false Christs, false prophets.
Showing great signs and wonders, powerful enough to potentially deceive the very elect.
And the key deception, according to Revelation 13?
That fatal head wound. He receives a wound that looks deadly, but then he somehow recovers, heals, faking a resurrection.
Which leads to worldwide astonishment and worship. Who is like the beast, who can make war with him? Because his power comes from the dragon, Satan, making him seem invincible, divine even. Hashtag 6.2 Historical Kings of Jerusalem as allegory.
So this title, King of Jerusalem, how does history play into this claim?
The sources point back to Adonizedek. He was the original king of Jerusalem right after the flood, and his name means Lord of Righteousness. He was allied with other kings in the region, like the king of Hebron.
Setting a symbolic precedent for the title.
Right. And Jerusalem itself, it was apparently prized by Rephaim after the flood, and it's seen as the absolute epicenter city of end-time prophecy.
Some sources even link its recapture in 1967 to the start of the fig tree generation, that final countdown period.
That's mentioned, yes. The anticipation is that the Antichrist will stake his claim to be king of Jerusalem, asserting his divine right to rule right when he's crowned in the rebuilt temple, the Abomination.
And divine right to rule. What does that mean exactly in this context?
It's that old royal assertion. Their authority comes directly from their God, making them answerable only to that deity, not to the people they rule. Absolute, unquestionable power derived from a higher, possibly dark, source. Hashtag 6.3 Royal Bloodlines and Heraldry.
Okay, so if he claims this title, possibly alleging Davidic descent, are there specific royal bloodlines the sources point to as potential candidates for this figure's background?
Yes, the concept of Rex Duus bloodlines comes up these alleged hidden lineages. Mentioned are the Merovingians, the Dalriada Celts, Camelot lines, Norse dynasties, even supposed descendants of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, or King Saul and David.
A mix of historical and legendary lines.
Right. But the sources particularly highlight the ennobled House of Stuart. They apparently boasted the unification of many of these Rex Duus lines and were considered the most ennobled bloodline of their era.
Making them a prime candidate in this interpretation. And this connects to heraldry, symbols.
Specifically the unicorn. It's prominent on the Stuart coat of arms, the British coat of arms, the Hanover coat of arms.
The unicorn isn't really biblical, is it?
Well, here's the twist the sources point out. The word unicorn was apparently unexplainably substituted for the Hebrew word rum, meaning wild bull, 9 times in the King James Bible.
Wild bull. Not a unicorn. So what's the significance of Rome?
It's interpreted as the young bull of Syrian, which is Mount Hermon, and that links directly to the ancient bull cult of Baal worship.
Okay.
The prophecy in Numbers 24 says this unicorn's horn, or rum's horn, will be exalted and anointed. This reflects the Antichrist figure who starts as a little horn in Daniel 7 and rises to great power.
A little horn that grows powerful.
Yes, a horn that will push the people together, whose strength will eat up the nations, acting as a king higher than Agag, which the Septuagint apparently reads as Gog.
Wow. So a common heraldic symbol, the unicorn, is reinterpreted through this KJV translation quirk to connect to Baal worship, Mount Hermon, and the Antichrist figure as this powerful horn.
That's complex. It's a
Because-
very specific allegorical connection drawn from these textual details and historical symbols. Hashtag tag 6.4 Mount Hermon's occult significance.
So, Mount Hermon, Syrian, the place of the wild bull. Why is it so significant in this interpretation?
Beyond the bull cult link, the sources highlight its alternate name, Mount Sion, spelled S-I-O-N, a French transliteration of Zion.
Sion, not Zion, Z-I-O-N, like in Jerusalem.
Exactly. The argument is that Mount Hermon's Zion will be speciously reimagined, deliberately confused with Jerusalem's holy mountain, Zion.
A strategic confusion of sacred geography.
That's how it's presented. A polytheist interpretive approach deployed by Gnostic moles within Christianity to activate doctrinal minds buried in the KJV, specifically for the end times.
Activate minds, meaning twist interpretations.
Right. The sources anticipate attempts to assert the authority of the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, because it might support this view, sparking a renaissance of Mount Hermon as the sacred mountain with a kind of paganized history.
Feeding into that universal Babel-like religion.
Precisely. And Mount Hermon itself, its base, is historically loaded with occultic sacred sites and temples.
Like what?
The Rock of the Gods, the location of Baal's Gate of Hades, and that white dome temple dedicated to the goat god Pan, who is identified with Azazel.
Pan Azazel.
Yes.
Back to the goat god.
Yes. These sites are called the polytheist priories of Sion of old. The sources claim that royal Masonic founders later co-opted Jerusalem's Zion identity to basically mask their own polytheist beliefs and agendas behind a more acceptable front. Hashtag 6.5 Knights Templar, Priory of Sion, and Baphomet.
This sounds like it leads directly into the Knights Templar and the Priory of Sion.
Oh.
How do they fit in?
The historical connection starts with Godfrey de Bouillon, Duke of Lorraine, from the Vere bloodline, another significant lineage mentioned. He captured Jerusalem in 1099.
But didn't take the title king.
He declined it, perhaps strategically. But his secret backers, presumably these groups with interests in Mount Zion Hermon, established an abbey on Jerusalem's Mount Zion. This abbey later became the infamous Priory of Sion.
The shadowy group behind the scenes.
That's the portrayal. This Priory of Sion then officially established the Junior Knights Templar Order in 1118, led by Hugh de Payenne. The Templars acted as their more public military arm.
And the Templars, this is where Baphomet comes in, right? That notorious figure.
Yes. The sources allege that the Templar adepts, the inner circle, worshipped Baphomet, described as a head or a skull of a goat god.
A goat god. Pan Azazel.
Enacted. Baphomet is identified as a fallen angel of Celtic and Galatian tradition. The Templars reportedly called him Agios Ishiros Baphomet, Holy Strong Baphomet.
Strong, like the mighty angels in Revelation. Ishro.
Exactly that word. Linking this figure worshipped by the Templars directly to powerful, angelic, potentially demonic entities, it suggests a dark spiritual force at the core of their highest rites.
And the image of Baphomet itself. It's very specific, very symbolic.
Extremely. The sources detail it. Bearded, angel wings, specifically swan feathers, a torch between its horns representing illumination. One arm points up, coagula, gather, unite. One down, solve, dissolve, symbolizing as above, so below. And maybe a union of opposites, like sexes. A pentagram on the forehead.
And the body parts. Legs of Pan, head of Chem.
Great. Legs of Pan, the goat god, head representing Chem, blackness, alchemy, torso representing Leviathan, the sea dragon, serpents entwined around a phallus like Hermes Caduceus.
It's a composite nightmare figure.
It really is. The sources call it a type of Chem Zoroaster and also a quinator associated with Merovius, the semi-mythical founder of the Merovingian dynasty. It embodies this merging of numerous dark, ancient occult traditions into one potent symbol. ###67, the new Templars and hidden hierarchies. ###7.1 Templar survival and new orders.
Okay, so the Templars are officially suppressed in 1307, Friday the 13th. Everyone thinks they're gone, but the sources say, not quite.
Not even close, according to this narrative. They just went underground. The story goes that Pierre Dumont, a high-ranking adept, escaped with 18 ships from France to Scotland.
Where other Templars were waiting.
Apparently so. They were welcomed, suggesting an existing network. In 1313, Dumont established a new Templar church, explicitly independent of Rome. A clear break.
And this led to other orders.
Yes. King Robert the Bruce of Scotland then instituted the Rosy Cross Order, the Rosicrucians, specifically for these Templar adepts in 1323.
The Rosicrucians came directly from the Templars in Scotland.
That's the lineage presented. And then it gets even more specific. In 1333, a Holy College of 33 was formed. They called themselves the Invisible Ones.
Why 33?
Explicitly in honor of demons and fallen angels, according to the sources. This Invisible College of 33 is then said to have created the more public Rosicrucian order.
So there's a hierarchy.
A very clear one described. The Council of 33 still sits at the top, overseeing the Committee of 300, and then the lower Rosicrucian orders branching out below. It suggests a highly structured, enduring hierarchy with this dark spiritual dedication right at its core. #7.2 Ordo Draconis and Royal Bloodlines.
Wow. Okay, and alongside the Rosicrucians, there's another order mentioned, the Ordo Draconis. Order of the Dragon. Sounds ominous.
It does. This order was supposedly formed by Rex Duus kings, those same supposed hidden royal lines and refugee Templar adepts, this time in Hungary.
Another Templar offshoot linked to royalty.
Yes. Officially established in 1408 with 23 kin Rex Duus sovereigns, basically an elite club of powerful interconnected families, all part of the same network.
And their symbol. Does it connect?
Absolutely. The Dragon Court of Luxembourg, where Sigismund, king of Hungary and a key founder, came from, used an emblem of a dragon incurved into a circle around a red cross.
Wait. Dragon and a cross?
Yes. And that's described as the same emblem adopted by the Rosicrucian order. A direct symbolic link.
Showing these groups are intertwined.
Deeply. This legacy connects to the Lusanian dragon kings of Draconis and claims of Scythian and Pict ancestry via the Angevin royal house. It maps out this broad, ancient network of dragon lineages across Europe.
And Sigismund himself, he became Holy Roman Emperor.
In 1411. And the sources explicitly label Holy Roman Emperor as an antichrist title, alongside his claim to the King of Jerusalem title.
So these powerful symbolic titles and royal claims all converging, pointing towards a figure fulfilling end-time prophecy.
That's the interpretation presented. A convergence of power, lineage, and symbolically charged titles. Hashtag 7.3 Rosicrucian manifestos and Illuminati origins.
Okay, so Rosicrucianism emerges more publicly with manifestos around the late 1500s, early 1600s. Father Christian Rosenkreutz. Maybe a real person, maybe not.
Right, possibly Johann Valentin Andrea. This period marks a wave of esoteric thought influencing Europe.
And then comes the Illuminati, a name everyone knows, usually linked with conspiracy. How do the sources describe their origins?
They trace it back to the 1500s in Rome, not Bavaria initially, founded by enlightened mathematicians and astronomers like Galileo, who were actually opposed to the Roman Church's dogma at the time.
So initially anti-establishment.
Yes, but they were hunted by the church, fled Italy, and ended up among Bavarian elites. That's where they merged with Freemasons.
And this is where their agenda shifted.
Or clarified.
A division of labor emerged, according to the sources. Freemasonry focused more on the practical stuff, military and politics. The Illuminati aimed higher, or perhaps deeper. World government, the destruction of Christianity, and bringing about their universal religion.
A much grander, more transformative agenda.
Exactly. And strategically, they then populated the lower adept degrees of Freemasonry, infiltrating it from within.
Spreading their globalist objectives through an existing widespread network. Clever.
It highlights a long-game strategy, hidden influence, working towards this ultimate goal of a unified world under their universal religion. Hashtag 7.4 banking and hidden wealth. You can't have secret societies plotting world domination without money, right? Where's the financing come from?
The sources point directly to the Rothschild family. Originally named Bauer, established around 1700, their purpose, allegedly, to replace the banking arm outside the Roman Church.
A parallel banking system.
More than that, the claim is they served as a front to launder the hidden wealth of the princes of Masonry.
Laundering money for the Masonic elite, that's a huge allegation.
It is. The narrative continues that Rothschild banks deliberately funded European wars, on both sides sometimes, indebting the royal houses, like the Habsburgs, gaining immense leverage.
And who do they answer to in this structure?
They supposedly report to pureblood family representatives in the Committee of 300. This committee then directs major international financial institutions, the IMF, World Bank, World Economic Association.
Suggesting a deeply centralized financial control operating behind the scenes.
That's the picture painted. And it actually builds on the Templar legacy. People forget the Templars essentially invented international banking.
Right, they were the financiers for most European thrones.
Yeah.
Exchange notes, checks, credit.
Exactly. They established the first real international banking network. So when they were suppressed in 1307, what happened to all that wealth and expertise?
Good question. Did the French king get it all?
Apparently not. The sources described this Templar smuggling gambit. They moved French assets out, some to Scotland, but a larger balance went to Switzerland.
Switzerland,
Yeah.
out of reach of the king and the pope.
Precisely. And this clandestine move, this hidden Templar wealth, became the genesis for Swiss banking.
No way. Swiss banking started with smuggled Templar gold.
That's the claim. Even the Swiss flag, the white cross on red, is noted as reflecting the white cross of the Knights of St. John who took over some Templar assets.
But weren't the Knights of St. John a Christian order?
Outwardly, yes. But the sources allege they were actually established by Royal Masons and Cistercian Gnostics, implying a hidden, non-Christian agenda even within that seemingly religious organization. Another layer of deception.
Okay, let's shift to another powerful symbol the sources discuss, the thelemic tree, an allegory for a world order tied into occult beliefs. It starts with trees, specifically the biblical warning against planting groves near God's altar, Deuteronomy 16.
Right. And that word grove is directly linked to Asherah, Ashtoreth, Astarte, Ishtar, ancient fertility goddesses, consorts of Baal.
So specific trees were associated with pagan worship.
Yes. Ash, elm, cedar, oak are mentioned, used for idol carving, sacred sites, as seen in Isaiah and Ezekiel.
And the elm tree gets special attention.
It does, apparently sacred in Gnosticism. The sources mention an occult cutting of the elm ritual at Gizur's castle. This wasn't just trimming branches. It represented a significant event that separated the Knights Templar from the Priory of Sion.
Symbolic split within the secret societies, marked by cutting an elm. Interesting.
It highlights the deep mystical significance attached to specific trees within these hidden traditions. Hashtag 8.2 the world tree and its hierarchy.
So how does this tree symbolism translate into an allegory for a world order?
The sources talk about the family tree or genealogical tree concept. They say it's an arcane merging of two ideas. The biblical tree of Jesse, representing lineage,
Right, Isaiah 11.
merged with Boccaccio's family tree of gods from mythology. This combined family tree becomes an allegory for the occult tree of life, often depicted as the world tree.
The world tree, symbolizing the cosmos, the structure of reality.
And the hierarchy of power within it. The symbolism goes deeper. Deciduous trees, losing leaves and returning, symbolize reincarnation.
Okay.
Evergreen trees, staying green year-round, represent immortality. And guess which one symbolizes the secret society hierarchy?
Evergreen. Immortality.
Exactly. The sources claim royal Masonic orders dwell at the apex, functioning like invisible ones through their lower trunk organizations.
Like branches on a tree. How specific does this hierarchy get?
Very specific. It's illustrated as a giant cedar tree. At the very top, the 13 European families' trunk secret society. Below that, the Chunk Council of 33 families.
The same 33.
Seems so. And then below them, the Royal Masonic Orders as main branches: Golden Fleece, Knights of the Seraphim, Ordo Draconis, Knights of St. John. It's a detailed map of perceived global power, structured like an ancient mystical symbol. Hashtag 8.3 Rabelais and the Abbey of Thelem.
This brings us to Francois Rabelais. The sources mention him as a key writer who helped shape secret societies after the Templars fell, using cryptic green language.
Legomanism, yeah. A way to conceal occult secrets in seemingly straightforward writing, especially in his famous book Gargantua and Pantagruel, which is apparently full of rampaging giants.
Giants again. And he created this fictional Abbey of Thelem.
Built by the giant Gargantua, and its only rule was, do what thou wilt.
The famous Aleister Crowley phrase, but from Rabelais first.
Apparently so. The sources interpret this rule as meaning act like little gods, because they desire what they are denied by the laws of God in the Bible. It frames this polytheistic dualism, setting Satan up as God's equal.
And Gargantua himself.
Ooh.
His lineage.
Traced back to antediluvian giants, including a king named Hertali, who supposedly survived the flood by, get this, hanging onto Noah's Ark.
Seriously. Okay, that definitely connects it to those ancient myths.
It does. And the core Thelemic doctrine, as explained here, it's that the inner being of certain humans is that of the gods.
Divinity within.
Stemming from the counterfeit spirit received by giants from the fallen angels. So, on this Thelemic tree, the apex is populated by these inner adept beings, the pure bloods of the royal dynasties.
Those with the divine spark.
Right. Thelema means will. It links to the will of the gods' kingdom to come. The idea is the will of the gods will be done in earth as it is done in heaven. That, as above, so below principle again.
And Hades, the underworld.
Is seen as a kind of heaven, the source of power, where the roots of this Thelemic tree extend from, a complete inversion of traditional cosmology.
Wow. And this ties into the Holy Grail somehow, the Babylon goddess.
Yes. The sources describe the Babylon goddess holding the Grail, her secret. But this Grail isn't about purity, it's the cup of abominations.
Representing what?
The potential for divinity and infinity that lies within the flesh. The secret of the Holy Grail, in this interpretation, is the mystery of the divinity found within humans, specifically certain elite bloodlines. It's a doctrine of self-divinization. Hashtag tag 9, Jesuit influence and the rise of the Mary cult. Hashtag tag 9.1, Jesuit origins and royal connections.
Okay, let's move forward a bit in time, but still swimming in these deep ancient currents. Let's talk about the Jesuits and the rise of the Mary cult. The sources mention Francis Borgia, Duke of Gandia. Sounds important.
Very. He funded Ignatius of Loyola early on, later became the Jesuit Commissary General, and even managed Vatican banking under Emperor Charles V. That points to serious power and influence right from the start.
And the Jesuit founders themselves, Ignatius, Peter Faber, Francis Xavier, they weren't just random priests.
Not according to these sources. They all came from significant ancient royal bloodlines, and they engaged in dubious Gnostic and mystical rituals with a clear aim, restructuring the Roman Church in their preferred Gnostic image.
Reshaping the church from within, based on Gnostic ideas.
That's the claim. And Francis Xavier's origins are highlighted Basque, from Navarre, Aragon. This connects to the Atlantean race mythos.
Atlantis. Seriously.
Yeah, the idea of a superior royal bloodline from Homo Atlantis. Myths claiming the Basques seeded ancient Egypt, Sumer, Scythia after the flood. asserting this incredibly ancient, almost pre-human lineage for certain royal lines.
So the very founders of the Jesuits are allegedly tied into these ancient royal, mystical, even mythical bloodlines and Gnostic traditions. Wow. Hashtag 9.2, the Mary cult and Gnostic interpretation.
And a absolutely central part of the Jesuit story and its impact on Catholicism is the devotion to Mary. It starts with Ignatius himself.
His personal vision.
Right. In 1522, in Manresa, Spain, he had this personal Mary apparition where she supposedly promised to guard him. This led directly to his intense dedication, becoming her knight, a Mary's knight.
And this devotion shaped the order. But the interpretation of Mary, it's not standard Catholic doctrine in these sources, is it?
No, it's presented through a Gnostic lens. Mary is seen as the new Queen of Heaven, even potentially the wife of Jesus and Sophia's representative on earth.
Sophia, the Gnostic wisdom goddess.
Exactly, making Mary cognate or related to ancient pagan queens of heaven, like Isis. So the Mary cult described here is this blend, this syncretism of Christian reverence and ancient pagan Gnostic ideas.
And this worship of Mary, it wasn't always central.
It formally began at the Council of Ephesus in 431 AD, but the sources claim this incorporated rituals that originated in Babylon and explicitly mimic the worship of Isis. Mary even gets the title Madonna della Strada, Our Lady of the Way, patron of the main Jesuit church.
And the apparitions, Guadalupe, Lourdes, Fatima, they're key to spreading this.
Absolutely key. Guadalupe in Mexico, 1531, right after the Aztec defeat. Lourdes, 1858. Fatima, 1917. Medjugorje, ongoing since 1981.
What are the common themes in these appearances, according to the sources?
Mary appears as Queen of Peace, Mother of God, Mother of all people, urging peace and cooperation, and crucially, uniting under one true religion.
Pushing for religious unity. And the imagery, like Guadalupe.
Very specific. Golden rays, crescent moon, 46 stars, fleur-de-lis, an angel at her feet. Noted as identical to a Spanish painting, but also linked symbolically to Revelation 12.1, the woman clothed with the sun, and to Sophia, who supposedly created the 12 archons in Gnosticism.
And Fatima, the prophecies.
3 visions mentioned. A vision of hell-burning earth, prediction of WWII, and a secret third vision about Russia or end times, all adding to the mystique and authority.
So the Jesuit role was to promote this?
Yes, advancing both the Roman Church's agenda and their own agenda, expanding massively into education, establishing colleges, training priests through their own mystical lens, the 7 sacred sciences, philosophy all geared towards their vision of a new world order under one religion. Hashtag 9.3, ecumenism, liberation theology, and doublespeak.
Then there's a shift noted around 1968. The Jesuits moved more into social work, ecumenism, human rights, politics. And this coincides with the founding of the Club of Rome.
That timing is highlighted as significant. A strategic repositioning towards influencing global societal structures, not just religion.
And liberation theology comes into play here.
Yes. The sources claim it was actually conceived by higher royal Masonic organizations and then assigned to Jesuits to implement.
Assigned, wow. What is it? Yeah,
exactly. A synthesis of Christian and Marxist theology, focusing on social justice for the poor, but through political liberation for the oppressed.
And Pope Francis, his approach.
His reconciliation with liberation theology is framed as a tactic, a way to usher in the new Babylon, that one world system, by partnering with left-wing progressive global socialism, using social justice language to achieve a globalist political goal.
And his communication style, described as double entendre, saying one thing meaning another.
That's the analysis. His calls for unifying religions, bringing Jewish, Muslim, evangelical, Orthodox, Christian faiths together. It sounds positive, inclusive.
Like the document Human Fraternity for World Peace, stating religious diversity is willed by God.
Right. On the surface, it's about tolerance. But the underlying message, according to this interpretation, is about dissolving distinct beliefs into one unified system, using ecumenism as a tool.
And there's that weird translation point, Mark 16.15, preaching to creatures instead of nations.
Yeah, itesis, creature, creation, being, instead of ethnos, nations, tribes, races. The sources call it an odd translation and connect it to Vatican figures like Monsignor Balducci, who talked about, well, aliens.
Aliens, seriously, the implication being
that the Vatican is preparing to initiate aliens into Babylon. Nephilim, Rephaim, other Nephilim-created creatures. It suggests the scope of this unified Babylon is potentially cosmic, not just human.
that is out there. and Francis's failure of the cross speech.
Interpreted as hinting that the resurrection itself will eventually be downplayed, relegated to an allegory, what Gnostics call an eucatastrophe, a sudden positive turn within a narrative, but here applied negatively to core Christian belief.
Shifting the focus away from the traditional gospel.
Towards the gospel of end-time world umbrella religion, Babylon, a universal system that accommodates everything, maybe even non-human entities. A calculated departure, hashtag tag 10, rogue Jesuits and the globalist gambit, hashtag tag 10.1 Jesuit operatives and the black nobility.
Okay, bringing you to the present day or near future. The sources talk about Jesuit operatives sponsored by the Italian black nobility still being active within the global network of secret societies.
Right. Suggesting this powerful alliance between certain Jesuit factions and ancient European aristocratic elites is ongoing, working behind the scenes.
And the idea of a rogue Jesuit gambit, what does that mean?
It suggests a faction, maybe these black nobility-backed Jesuits, are calculating when to supersede the current New World Order schema. Like they have their own plan, waiting for the right moment to potentially seize control from other globalist factions.
An internal power struggle within the hidden structure.
That's the implication. And the Italian black nobility are key players here. Families like Pacelli, Borgia, again, Orsini, Borghese, Massimo, Colonna, Conti.
With lineages traced back centuries, even millennia, to Roman emperors.
Some claim lineage back to Justinian, or even Augustus and Julius Caesar, astonishingly ancient roots. The junior black nobility trace back to the powerful trading families of Venice and Genoa, linked to ancient empires like Babylon, Persia, Greece, Phoenicia.
So deep, ancient networks of aristocratic power and wealth still allegedly pulling strings today. Hashtag 10.2, the Club of Rome and world government.
And these networks connect to modern globalist organizations like the Club of Rome, founded 1968, same time as that Jesuit shift we discussed.
Sponsored by Rockefeller, who supposedly reports to Rothschilds.
Yeah.
It's layers within layers.
Exactly. And populated by these Venetian and Genoa black nobility, members often overlapping with the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, all guided allegedly by senior Rosicrucian purebloods from the Committee of 300.
So what's the Club of Rome's stated objective?
Officially, world peace and global prosperity through world government. They talk about tackling the problematique, this complex web of global crises.
How do they do that?
By commissioning reports highlighting apocalyptic problems, peak oil back in the day, population explosion, now global warming, specifically to push for world government solutions.
Using crises, real or perceived, to justify centralization of power.
That's the interpretation, leveraging fear and urgency to advance their specific agenda for global governance. A calculated strategy. Hashtag tag 10.3, the future of the Vatican in Babylon.
So where does the Vatican, the official Catholic Church, fit into this endgame, especially with these alleged rogue Jesuit factions and black nobility influence?
It's complicated. The sources recount the history. Jesuits were suppressed, then reinstated by popes. Interestingly, in 1769, the Rothschilds were appointed guardians of the Vatican treasury and banking.
Why?
Allegedly, to arrest control from rogue Jesuits. This suggests ongoing tension, strategic maneuvering, maybe even conflict between these powerful factions vying for control within the Vatican sphere itself, not a unified front.
And the ultimate outcome, prophetically speaking, Revelation 17 talks about the 10 horns, the kings of the beast empire, turning on the whore, Babylon.
Right. Hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire.
Which the sources interpret
as these end-time kings, initially allied within the new Babylon system, eventually plotting to destroy it, implying these power structures, even the ones seemingly controlling everything, will ultimately turn on each other in a final, fiery betrayal.
So the conclusion drawn from all this is
that rogue Jesuits, perhaps backed by the black nobility, have complete control over Catholicism in this view, and they plan to release the Marian cult fully when the current, more secular globalist agenda falters or fails.
Using the failure of one system to usher in their own.
Exactly. When the current plans drag the world into war and cause cataclysmic sorrows, this Marian-centric Babylonish religious system will be presented as the solution, paving the way for the Antichrist figure to rule. It's a long, calculated endgame culminating in a specific kind of world order. A truly sobering perspective presented in these sources.
Wow, that is quite a journey we've taken. From deep and ancient biblical prophecy through centuries of secret societies, allegorical figures, hidden lineages, right up to potential future conflicts and power plays.
It really is. This deep dive, based on these sources, paints this incredible picture of hidden structures, long-term agendas, operating just beneath the surface of history as we usually learn it.
Seeing how figures and events from thousands of years ago are interpreted as directly foreshadowing end-time events, it's mind-boggling. And the connections drawn between groups like the Templars, Rosicrucians, Jesuits.
It forms this intricate tapestry, and understanding these currents, these interpretations, it does offer a different lens, doesn't it? A way to maybe look at current global events, the push for unity, the rise of certain ideologies, and see potential deeper patterns if you accept the premises of the sources.
It definitely underscores the need for critical thinking. We're bombarded with information, with narratives.
And these sources suggest there's often a much longer game being played, planned meticulously for centuries, even millennia. It challenges you to look beyond the surface, question assumptions.
So for you, our listener, reflecting on this huge web of connections, ancient allegories, secret histories, financial networks, prophetic interpretations, what stands out?
Yeah, what piece of this puzzle resonates most? Or perhaps disturbs you the most? How might understanding this narrative, as presented by these sources, reshape how you view the past or how you interpret the future unfolding around us?
Lots to think about. Keep digging, keep questioning. Thanks for diving deep with us today.